that was a really heartening video. And as an educator, this is something that I see very often in schools, how teachers journey with students through the ups and downs. And sometimes the children, all the students, like Shirley, comes back to school and shared with us what is it that we did or say to them that make a difference in how they learn to overcome their personal challenges and situations. To a large extent, the work of educators is not just about imparting knowledge and skills, but it's also about building confidence in our students and helping them to bounce back after failures or any setbacks. And this is often what parents want to do for their children. But to do this well, parents need to have certain attitudes and instincts, don't we? So, Crispina, from an educator to another, and from a mom to another, we are all anxious for and about our children. And at the first hint of a problem, we will instinctively rush in to help our children. So I don't know what's your take on this. Always wanting to make sure that our children are safe, they don't fall, they don't fail.
Yeah, hi everybody. Just let me tell you a little bit about myself. I started life as a reporter, and I think that's one of the more interesting, transformative jobs that I've had because I was able to see and size up people. And I met so many people, lots of them parents, and from very different walks of life. And then when I had to take care of my boys, I have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old, I moved to teaching where the hours were a little bit more sane. So looking back, because my kids are already, like a lot of my friends tell me that my work as a parent is done because they're quite old already. You can, leave them be. Looking back, I think I went through phases as a parent too. With my first child, I was very protective. I think that's our natural instinct. I mean, we want to do our best by them. But sometimes I think, even for myself and for my husband, we overdo it. If you sit at a local playground, you will notice a lot of parents telling their kids not to run, which is quite ironical, given that it's a playground, because they're so afraid that they would fall. So from very early on, my husband and I decided that we would try to curb our protective instincts and to let our kids fall. Thankfully for us, that hasn't, really turned into any sort of disaster. But until now, parenting a teenager is not easy. My second one told me when he was in Sec 2, he wants to pierce his ears, which I don't agree with. But I decided to let him try. And then just 2 months ago, he told me, you know what, I'm going to let it close. I don't really like it anymore. So you see, I think my idea is that if we try to curb our instincts to always solve the kid's problem or to fix it, it might actually be better for them, right? It's a tough thing to do. I totally understand that, but that's been my experience.
I wonder whether you can share with us, one lesson you pick up as a mom, right? From your son's hiking trip in Selangor, just to elaborate on the point that you just made about curbing your instincts. And was there an accident somewhere?
Okay. The reason the moderator knows about my son's hiking trip to Selangor is because I wrote about it. I write quite a bit, on social media. So my son is 19, he's in the army now, and this was after he finished his A-levels. And he had some time during the holidays. And he told me that he was, he just came home one day and he said, Mom, I'm going hiking in Selangor. And I'm leaving tomorrow night. so I said, where is this place? How are you going to get there? Have you got any accommodation? All the normal questions parents would ask. And he said, I have no idea how we're going to get there. We'll probably get a bus. We haven't made any accommodation plans, and we're just going to wing it. And I couldn't talk him out of it. He was already 18 years old. So I discussed it with my husband, who basically said, you got to let him try. What can you do? You can't follow him, right? I said, no way I'm going to do that. So he went, and I didn't hear from him for about 40 hours, for about nearly 2 days. And I began to become quite frantic, actually. And then he called, right, on the second and a half day. He called, and he asked for my husband to translate in Malay with one of the drivers to get them to negotiate to bring him and his friends out of the hiking area into town. Because they had run into some trouble, they had basically run out of money, and they couldn't speak Malay. And so my husband did. He translated, and the guy managed to get him out. So when he came back, finally, he had scratches and bruises, and it was a pretty bad, like it's a steep hike. It's not Bukit Timah Hill, basically. So I decided to write about it because it is so different from who I am. I plan everything. I have to-do lists, and I'm very protective generally. But I think he taught me that I have to really, at some point, let go and have faith instead of focus on the fear. And I think it was a very transformative experience for him, because now he knew all the things that could go wrong and how, he behaved in that environment, that with him and 3 of his friends, basically. And I think, so he taught me more than I could teach him, really, about overcoming difficulty, overcoming fear, and trying to solve a problem that he would never have encountered in the safe confines of his classroom or my home.
So I can see that your son is a very spontaneous person. But on the other hand, I think you have done something right, because your child, when he encountered a problem, he called home. Yeah. And the parents didn't say, I told you so. So, so that's something very positive about your parenting, that we all must learn to curb our I told you so kind of attitude. Yeah. So it is about letting your child experience, you control some of your emotions and allow the child to experience failure and to learn from it. So I would like to move on to Christian. I understand that you are quite involved and passionate about mentoring young people. And you have seen how our education system have supported some who may be feeling a bit discouraged. So in your experience with your child and even with those that you mentor, how do you develop in them a sense of hope and to see the possibilities that are available to them?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. I started out mentoring when I became a founder of a social enterprise where we work with youth at risk and ex-offenders in the air conditioning and electrical maintenance background. And in these students, we were able to get very close to them over a period of 2 to 3 weeks and help them develop ideas of where they want to go and find their strengths, and then work with them on those strengths. And also give them a lot of confidence and let them know that they're in a safe place. A lot of my experience with these youth is that they fail to receive sufficient affirmation from their families and friends, and we bring them out of that circle and into a very positive environment where it's always about what we saw in the video earlier, how much extra you've increased in terms of performance, and not how much more you have to go. And I think changing that paradigm helps them to feel good about themselves. I mean, it's like all of us, right? When you tell yourself you're gonna achieve 10 things, and you know for sure you could have done 12, and you achieve those 10, despite being very tired, you feel good about yourself. Well, at least I feel good about myself. And I think with regards to mentoring, I myself was mentored when I felt very depressed and low when I lost my dad to cancer. And I have to say that do unto others as you would like them have do unto you. And I just simply use that principle and continue looking out for you who need a friend and someone they can look to for encouragement. And I think advice is such a passé word in this day and age. I think with so much available now, it's more about just having someone who will listen to you, just take time and just let the guy speak. And that's what I do with my daughter. That day she's doing a PSLE this year, and she's got so many CCAs. She's in St. Hilda's, and so it's the school where in P6 they get air-conditioned classrooms, so they're forced to work harder because they've got those cool rooms. And so she's got a lot of pressure, right? And so the days where she comes back and she just doesn't want to talk, but I just sit there, and she says, "Why are you still here?" I said, "Well, I'm here to listen." And then, lo and behold, after 15 minutes of silence, she starts talking, right? And after half an hour, she goes to sleep, giving me a big hug and kiss goodnight. So I think similarly with all of us, we have this emotion deep inside us that wants to be embraced. And so I try and do that as much as it has been done for me. Yeah.
So, teenagers, I mean, your girl is going to reach teenage years, and teenagers are very temperamental. That's what my son tells me. When on days I say, "How come you're not talking?" And he said, "Mom, I'm a teenager. We are temperamental." So I got to respect that. So I think in mentoring these young people, I just want to find out, what is it that they're looking for? And how do you reach out to these youths, so to speak?
Yeah, I did a project last year with about 15 of these youths from ITE, and I was initially very taken aback because they didn't seem interested at all. Even though there was a carrot dangling, like there was cash and everything for the winning team, it didn't seem to motivate them. And I went to the lecturer who I work with, and I said, "What do I do?" Right? And he's been doing this for 20 years. So he set me down, we had teh tarik, and he gave me some advice, right? And so again, it was really not giving up, just saying that I've signed to do this program and I'm just going to finish it. And so I think when the students saw us coming back over and over again for the sessions, even though they didn't show that they were very interested, by the third session, things started to change, things started to look up. And we again reorganized part of the curriculum to make it more engaging, a lot of group work, and having little competitions. And I think that the kids today, like how they do gaming, I mean, it's fun to gamify stuff, right? So with that helped a lot in achieving the end result, which was very positive. We were able to reach out to about 50 households in Bedok over 2 weekends, and helped all these 1-room, 2-room flats to increase awareness about electricity and global warming and things like that, and also help them change bulbs. So we're doing another run this quarter. So it's become a very positive spin-off effect, and I think they themselves share with their own families. And I visit some of the families of the ex-offenders who come and join us, and it's shocking to see the way they live. Right? You get a 1-room flat with 8 people in there, and their room is also the dining room, is also the TV room, is everything, right? It's all in there. And I said, how do you study? Like, what? I'm sorry, And that's the reality, that's the reality we have out there. And this is Singapore. You don't even talk about going to Cambodia but my life really changed when I went to Cambodia on a mission trip, and I saw the lives of the kids there, and I realized how much more we have. And so that's the other thing I keep encouraging these guys in IT and all that. Hey, you think you got it bad, but guess what? You are now going to be, sharing all that you know with all of these people in Singapore and abroad. So guess what? You're like a coach. You're like a teacher yourself. So don't let these people down. They need you. And the minute they hear, wow, somebody needs me, and then they light up. So that's just one of the things that I've learned.
So I think from Crispina and from Christian, we hear things like in working with the youths, we need to empower them, we need to trust them to know that they know what they're doing and they can deliver, right? So I want to move on to Meng, because this thing about trusting your son, your children to do something that he wants to do is, I think you have a personal experience to share with regard to your son. I understand that he's doing quite well for himself, working as a photographer and as an influencer, even as he's studying. So I want to ask you, what was it like to say, okay, son, you can pursue what you want to be, even if you're thinking of dropping out of school, I will support you. So there's something that is very difficult for parents like us to say, to learn to let go and trust that he knows what he wants to do. Share with us your experience.
Okay, so I didn't actually say if you want to drop out of school, it's okay. Generally, I think me and my wife are very hands-off in our parenting. My older son is foundation year in Temasek Poly now, and my younger one's in Sec 2. But from primary 3 onwards, they go to school themselves, despite the fact that both me and my wife have a car each, and we don't send them. So they find their way. And being boys, they engage in rough play, and they get up to whatever it is that they do. So my older son has like 6 stitches behind and 4 stitches here, and as long as he's not permanently injured, I'm actually okay bringing him to hospital. And some of the other things I can't really share, but I mean, yeah, piercing ears. My wife actually brought my son to pierce ears, and we're asking him if he ever wants to get tattooed, please bring us along, because we would want to get the tattoos as well. He starts drinking, and when his friends come, we lay out the liquor, even though they're not supposed to be drinking at that age. So I think there's very little for them to rebel when we just let them experiment. I mean, the way I think about it is that this thing about life expectancy and us living to 85 years old is quite a recent thing. If you look back like 200 years, I mean, human beings have been around, say, 70,000 years, but 1800s, life expectancy was only 39. Okay, 39 for humans. Okay, so when you're 39, I mean, for a lot of cultures, the adult age is actually 12. And the moment they cross puberty, they're married at 13, 14, 15, and then they're having kids at that age, because biologically that's possible. And then the men at 17, 18 are out fighting wars and building careers and apprenticing and learning a trade. So they are adults at that age, and it's only in the last 50 years or so when life expectancy has gone up so much that we have also extended the sense of what it means to be a child. And then sometimes we baby our kids, I feel, till they're like past university, and we're still sending them to school, and they're 24 years old, and we're still thinking of them as kids. So in my mind, they're adults from like past puberty, and I really need to leave them alone to do what it is that they want to do, and find out about life themselves. So so failed subjects. We don't do tuition. My son just did well enough in PSLE he went into a normal stream. He was borderline. He either go into bad school in Express or a better school in normal. I said, what do you want to do? You want to go into normal? He said he wanted to go into normal, and that's fine. And then somehow he found his way to do a bit better, and now his foundation year in Temasek Poly. So, and then of course he picked up photography at 15 and became quite good at it. He has 8,000 over followers on Instagram. And they started dealing in sneakers and made thousands of dollars. And he makes that kind of money consistently. So last month he made 2,000, and the month before he made 800. So he's earning an income himself, and he's just started in Temasek. He's supposed to be learning the things in school to be earning money later, but he already has the skills he picked up from YouTube, and he's already making business contacts, shaking hands, asking for jobs, and so he's hustling. So I mean, so why are we so hands-off? Because I want my kids, an important kind of attribute I like them to have is this sense of fearlessness, okay, to not be afraid. So to fall down, get stitches, fail exam, it's all, I don't know this thing about failure, because it's all part of what life is. I mean, how the guy who has never failed, I'm actually, I'm never going to hire that guy, because his first failure is going to likely be with me if he. So, if you've never failed, you don't. Actually, this whole thing about failure, I don't mind. I mean, because the whole economic strategy of the country initially was that we invited the foreign multinational in, and so we emphasized competency and efficiency, right? So you needed to know how to do your job, and hello. And you needed to do it as low cost as possible. And that was when we worked for these multinationals who were in Singapore, right? But then now in the country, we have a situation where we need to invent our own things, where we need to be creative and innovative, right? And so we're no longer working for others. And when we need to be innovative and creative, it's very hard to say that you don't make mistakes. Like everything we do, that we try to be creative and innovative in, we get it right all the time, and we get it right at the lowest cost possible immediately. So when the mindset has shifted to this creative mindset, then experimentation, as you've heard in the earlier panel, experimentation is necessary. And by definition, experimentation necessarily means a lot of failed tries before you discover what the right thing to do is. And so at a young age, I like my kids to just experience that. And the teachers complain that we don't put in enough effort to ensure that they pass. But I listen and say yes, and I go back and do my little bit of nagging, because I want them to, because all parents nag, and this is something I have to do, and I don't really want them to feel left out. But for me, I believe I am helping them build confidence and resilience, and that whole experimental life journey, where my job is just constantly be affirming and constantly just show a lot of love and tell them it's okay, and so they grow up with the confidence that whatever they do, no matter what they get into, daddy, mommy's always there, and I think that's the only thing that I need to do as a parent.
So I hear a form of parenting that is very uncommon amongst us, right? And he has set up an environment that encourages failures so as to build the child's ability to stand up, right? To thrive and to learn and to improve. So I want to ask Crispina, the students, because we're now moving on to how to help the child learn to overcome failures and setbacks. We've heard so much about setting the environment, giving them the conditions to fail. Now, I'd like to know from the panelists' experience, what was it like for the students under you, for the mentees under you, who were able to get out of it?
Okay, so I teach at Republic Poly, and there are 5 polys in Singapore, and Republic Poly is great. it's a wonderful program that they have. The way they teach is very different from all the other 4. But the way the chips fall is that it's usually the last choice for students after their O-levels. So every year at the start of a semester, especially if I'm teaching a year 1 class, I will ask them, how many of you want to be here? How many of you was this your first choice? And over the years, it's gotten better, but it's usually about 1/3 of the class. So the majority of them don't want to be there. And when you ask them, so we have this system where we have a reflection journal at the end of every lesson. And so the first lesson, I always want to ask them a little bit about themselves. And almost every year, and I've been teaching in RP for 10 years, 5 of them as a full-time staff, the thing that keeps coming up is that they always say, I'm lousy at studying. I'm not good. RP was my only option, you know. I don't really care about what I do. I just want to get my diploma and I want to get out. And their self-esteem is usually quite low. But actually, through the course of their diploma, I find that these are the most wonderful, hardworking, generous kids who help each other, who never give up. I don't get a bad attitude. I mean, of course, you do have the bad apples in every class there is. I mean, kids who don't really care. But by and large, what I find about these kids who don't do well academically, and these are the kids I see every day, is that they have in a very different set of values and skills, which are becoming, to me, much more useful in their current workforce. So how do they overcome? So many of them, sometimes I'm actually surprised when I see a kid write or present, and then I find out that this kid has gone through the ITE route. And I'm usually surprised, and I ask them, you know, what happened? So they said, I just failed my PSLE. I couldn't pass my mother tongue. My maths was horrible. But by the time they come to me, they've been kind of beaten up by the whole fact that they were told from the very beginning that they were lousy. So it takes time and effort and the way we teach and the way we mentor for them to build up that inner reserve, to say that you are not lousy just because you don't do well in exams. A lot of my kids go on to do so very well in their internships, and they are valuable to their employers. And you would never have guessed that they graduated from ITE, or they come through the poly route, or they went to RP. So yeah, I think the thing about kids is that it's quite tough lah. It can be quite difficult for them to overcome. I think with the right environment, with the right people, they can do much better than they always expect. So at the end of 3 years, they always say, I never expected, you know, to do so well than I did when they graduate. Yeah.
So I'm hearing is that I think the adults set up tasks for them to succeed in, and that gives them the confidence. I also hear that it's the peers that give them a lot of encouragement. So as I understand from the earlier panel session, there's a lot of teamwork, and when the students work in teams, I think they get affirmation from one another. Yeah. How about Christian?
The question was?
The question is that as you work with these young people,
Yes.
right, invariably they will experience setbacks. You know, they will striving for something, they didn't get it, and how long do they stay in this depressed mood, and what gets them out of it?
I think in these youth who have issues, setbacks. For my case, I had one particular student I can remember. I gave him a task. He was to record the temperature of the air conditioner that we were testing before and after a cleaning, to measure the temperature and the energy difference before and after so that we could use it in the study that we were doing. He failed in recording the temperature for 3 days consecutively. And when I asked him why, apparently he said he forgot. And the whole of the other teams was relying on his readings to do up their parts. And he went into a bit of depression, I have to say, and he took it really hard on himself because we had to redo the whole study. And I think what we did as a team, me and the two of the other lecturers, we were able to, again, encourage him. And surprisingly, having done it the second time, what happened was all the other students were like pros at it after that. So the end result was, lo and behold, that student in particular was the one who gave the announcement and the overview in front of the ministers when we had a presentation with NCCS and all in November last year. And I was really proud, and at the same time a bit ashamed, because it turned out that his parents were going through a terrible divorce, and there was so much going on in the background, which because we had like 19 students in total, I couldn't really get enough time with him in particular. Furthermore, I saw him as one of the brightest initially. So that's something that I reflected and realized on hindsight I had overlooked as well. And I think for a lot of us, that's the problem, right? Especially when you have 2 or 3 kids and you know that, oh, this is the bright one. And then we set these expectations on them. But the minute something doesn't work out, for that bright one especially, we fail to understand what took place, what transpired for him to fail or to not perform at that level. So that was a good example that I used today about really digging deep into reasons for the failure or for the lapse. And that is at the same time not using system 1. Our brain, we've got 2 systems, right? 1 and 2. We always go into system 1, right? When you see somebody doing this, you're like, oh, that guy is going to scold me. No, but actually he could be like warning that there's a boulder behind that's going to fall on you, right? But your system 1 says, oh, he's going to come and scold me. Okay, let's take a step back and say, let system 2 work. So I think that's really what's I advocate now, is to use system 2 and rationalize and see how best to address these situations.
Thank you for your contributions. I'm going to hold this. I think Meng can add on later on, but I'm going to move into dialogue, open up the dialogue to the audience. Is there anyone who would like to use the microphone to... Yeah, yes, please.
Hi, my name is, I'm Mrs. Sim. My son studies in Republic Polytechnic. And I want to tell you this thing because I've got 3 children, ages 16, 18, and 20. The first one went to Temasek Poly, and she has done exceedingly well. Not because of me, but somehow she did it her way. And my son, which is in RP, was very upset with me because we stay in the Woodlands. So when he wanted a course called the Aviation Management, there were only 2 schools that offered. One of them was Temasek Polytechnic, and the other one is RP. So he saw the sister's agony of traveling 2 hours to Temasek Polytechnic, and he thought that the better way is to they call RP. So when one of the teachers asked who chose RP as the first choice, and he was dead silent because he chose RP. Okay, going forward, talking about parenting is a very tough time, even as I struggle with my children today. In fact, I wrote a couple of articles on today concerning reflection of the parent as we look at the PSLEs and I look at the O-levels. I couldn't really agree with the last speaker concerning I couldn't agree because I have a basic values in myself concerning tooling and also putting wine and things on the table. So that is a no-no for my values as far as concerned. And that happens because both my husband and myself, we have shared parenting values. And that helps. as we move so that our children are not in a state of confusion. So going forward, I'm saying that as parent, it is tough. It is tough as a parent in Singapore. It is very tough. And the different journey of our kids, whether before preschool and primary school and up to secondary and even in poly and going to the university example, it is a challenge. And I'm still constantly wondering which part of the child cycle that I'm in. But I'm glad that one of the things I learned as a parent myself is I am a permanent seminar attendee, PSA in short. And I attend every single seminars that I possibly come, including this forum, because I believe as a parent, one of the best gifts we can give to the children is that we are constant learners. And if we are not constant learners, don't expect the children to learn constantly. So the previous speakers, foreign speaker mentioned about reading. Yes, I read a lot, but that doesn't guarantee my children reads. And that is beside the point. The point is that the best parenting so far that I ever know is called parenting by models. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your comment about how important it is to role model. And she is a great learner, learning about parenting, and I'm sure her children have grown up to be well developed in all areas. Yes, any other questions from the floor before I look at the questions that were posed online? Okay, no? Okay, so panelists, there's this question that I'd like to pose to you. Well, this question is, how can we encourage risk-taking and curb the fear of failure in the school environment?
Okay, maybe I'll try.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, taking risk in a school environment, I'm assuming refers to trying out new things. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I can only speak from my experience lah. So for my own kids, they are in CCAs which they enjoy doing. Okay, so I'm glad that they actually have something that's interesting to them, and so we pursue that. They usually stick in their lanes, and that's fine. In my school environment where I deal with other teenagers, I do come across kids who don't take any risk at all. If you ask them, what do you want to do? They will say, I don't know. You say, what do you like? I don't know. So it's the, so this is the challenge for us as educators, to try to get them to move beyond, just their comfortable environments, just to go to school and hang out with their friends and stuff like that. So what we normally do is we always get our kids to take part in a project, and this is outside class, and they have to go and do very frightening things like talk to strangers and do videos and things like that, and come back and produce those things. And so in that environment, we try to explain to the parents when we meet them. Sometimes parents are very worried. They will tell you, why is my kid going to, to Geylang to shoot and all that? I teach a mass comm course. So this is part of and parcel of the program for them to go out and do interesting places in Singapore. So I try to explain that only because they are willing to let their kids go and to force the kids to just get out of their comfort zone and give them something to do, that they will learn that actually taking a risk is not half as bad. So that's been my experience lah. Maybe Hon Meng?
So taking risks, it's really about, I think, the kind of fear maybe we inculcate in our children. And so in their minds, they're fearful of all these pitfalls that we tell them that there are in life. And then it becomes so difficult for them to take some risks. But whether these pitfalls are real or not, really is, I think, being quite liberal, and of course I don't think everybody will agree with how I think, but I think that a lot of these pitfalls aren't real. Let's say like, okay, I've got, like sports betting, for example, a World Cup and gambling. I actually like my kids to learn that. Because no, I mean, gambling is bad if you're hooked on it, if you become addicted to it. But if you just do it as a pastime, and especially when you're a kid and you're learning things like odds. You're learning things like how to place your bets in a way that would maximize odds. I mean, life is about probabilities. It's all about the likelihood of this happening or that happening. And I think learning to gamble is a great way to balance the odds and deciding how you should make your bets to maximize your chances of winning. So I know it's kind of tough because you mentioned gambling and like, oh, no, definitely, please keep my kids away from it. But I have the view that there are good things to learn from it, and especially if it's done with our guidance. And so with fewer things that I say are wrong, and they learn the right way to look at these things, like liquor, for example. Just for tasting, it goes nicely with food, but don't binge and drink to the extent that you're drunk. So we don't say no, but with our guidance, I think the fears are managed better. And when there's less fear about things, then your willingness to try things and to so-called take risks, it becomes lesser. The sense of it being risky is less. So your willingness to try is higher.
So I want to ask the panelists, what do you think most parents think about the notion of failure? What is the perception, and how is this transmitted to our children? And the second question is, how do we help correct that misperception about failures?
I think I can share because when I did my O-levels prelim, I failed everything. Like I had F9 for all my subjects. And so I thought it was a joke. Like, I was like looking at my teacher, I thought it was a joke. But the reality was that my dad had written me off at the time I turned 13. He told me in my face, he said, you're not going to amount to anything. And I said, Dad, you wait. So I developed a competition spirit to prove him wrong. And I have to say that what took place was I studied like crazy for the next couple of months, and I managed to get through and get into Polytechnic, into Singapore, Ngee Poly, and I did shipbuilding, offshore engineering for 6 months. I realized that there was a loophole in the army. You could do 2 years instead of 2.5 by not having a Polytechnic diploma. I was like, oh, that's cool. I can do 6 months to work and earn money than to serve the NS who only pays me $240. So I quit Poly. I told the lecturers, put me on hold. I said I go and do 2 years of NS first and come back out and continue. So after NS, I learned a trade. I learned how to fix air conditioners, and I was making $200 a day fixing air conditioners in my free time. By the time I was in the camps, in the Air Force, I was a regimental police. I was driving a car while my RSM was riding a motorbike. And the thing was because I was having all these part-time jobs, you see, all because I wanted to prove my dad wrong. Yeah. But again, that driven spirit to prove somebody wrong, I think it's innate in us, right? We prove gravity wrong by jumping and by breathing. But at the same time, we really have to balance it out. And I had to balance it out because lo and behold, I got into an accident during my NS days. In all my pursuit towards becoming a multi-millionaire by the age of 25, this was pre-Mark Zuckerberg, by the way. And all my dreams were dashed because I almost died, really. I literally I flew across the divider along Bukit Panjang Road, and I was almost crushed by a bus. And when I saw myself in that state, and with a fractured hand for 6 months out of action, I felt so handicapped. And it taught me so much about humility because my pride was like this giant marshmallow on my head. And it was unbelievable. And I saw what a monster I had become as well. So I had to balance things up, and that led me to continue going back to school, and I joined SIA as an aircraft technician, and then went back to Poly, did my 5-year diploma, and then later on did a part-time degree. All still to try and prove my dad wrong, but at the same time in a gentler tone. And So we worked towards it, and like I was sharing earlier, when my dad had cancer, we became really close, and I had to ask him for forgiveness for all the times that I was so arrogant to him. But I did remind him that it was because you told me I would amount to nothing that I didn't want to let that come to fruition. And we became best of buddies, and yeah, he passed away with a smile. But coming back to how to bring and lift people up when they're down in the dumps, I think I usually use my own experiences. When I thought I was going to die of pain, trust me, when you're in the army, you go to Alexander Hospital, and the physician, the surgeon comes in and tries to manipulate your wrist back into place without any anesthetic, you really think you're going to die out of pain. But yeah, and yeah, so it's all about having that balance and to keep humble. I think at the end of the day, what I learned the most is we can get this huge head, but always keep our feet planted on the ground and stay close to the ground at the same time. We've seen what's happening to Najib, yeah, so yeah. Let's not go there.
You know, I don't know how many of us will have that life-changing moments like yours, you know, to bounce back from a certain destructive path. So there's this question for the panel, which is, I think it seems to be a cry for help. How can we as parents help our kids face failures with less negative feelings, as words don't seem to negate those feelings in a child? What actions can we try, right? Besides those life-changing moments, those don't come by design.
Okay, maybe I wanted to say something about failure. I know that the common thing is it's okay to fail. Now there's this new narrative, right? I just want to say that when it comes to my own students and my own kids, I don't really tell them, you know, it's okay to go ahead and fail, okay? Because I believe that achievement is pegged to how much work you have to put in. And even for my own students, I tell them I'm a mentor to 10 kids, and I always tell them that you don't aim to fail. You aim to do the best that you can. And then after that, if you fail, then we need to find a way to fix that problem. So I think, how you approach failure is very important. Now, we do have very weak kids, very weak students. In fact, both of my sons are very different. The older one is quite academically inclined. It's easy for him to grasp. The younger one is less so. So I think the way we manage, your kid has different abilities as well. Now, when your kid fails an exam, especially if it's a big exam, it's quite tough to talk to them and for them to understand that it's okay. I think if you've ever been through any horrible thing in your life, at that moment, you feel as if the world is crashing, right? But actually, you get over it. Over time, things get better. You get new opportunities, you meet new people, and things come into play. So we have kids whose parents kind of force them into a JC education. They go into JC for 1 year, and they do spectacularly badly, and they get kicked out. And that moment in their life, they are inconsolable. Nothing can work, really. But they need to go through that and come out of it the other side. And once they do, and then they come into the poly system, and they finally find, okay, there's a way out for me. So I think as parents, in terms of actions, it's very hard to prescribe because it's different for every kid. But I think you need to be very open, and you need to be on the side of your kid, you know, to be protective of him in that way, like to try and find options that would enable him to move away from that and try something else. So that's been my experience with school.
Yeah. I'm just thinking whether I should say anything, because maybe the more I say, the more I get MOE into trouble. I mean, I actually have a very simple parenting kind of idea, and it's just You know, it's in the Beatles song that all you need is love, and that I just follow that very simple principle, and just to show a lot of affirmation, a lot of love all the time. And I think in my experience, I mean, I majored in psychology, so in NUS, so I worked in some of these projects. My sister is a social worker. I've come across many kind of these situations where, I mean, the school tries to do its best in terms of helping and encouraging kids, but often I think it's at home when all the pressures actually build up. And I mean, what is failure is, I don't know if like, for some parents who are super achievers who scored straight A's in school, and then for their kids to score like A2, it's failure, because that's their definition of failure. But if parents who like barely scrape through in school, and then the kid scores like a C5, and then that's, wow, very good, you know, because we never got C5. So what I'm saying is that all these success and failure measures are all kind of in our heads, so that we set it up. And then we want our kids to go to JC, and they didn't, and then they failed to go to JC. But if we never had that expectation, and it was all about just the love and affirmation for them to find their own way and define their own path, and we trust that they will do well in life and find their own way with very little intervention on our part, then I think that sense of failure will lessen. I think there will come a point in time when they will really, really want to do something with their lives. They focus on something that says, no, this defines me, this is who I am, this is what I want to do in my life, and they will go at it with all their energies. At that point, I would say failure is not an option. When you put all your eggs in one basket and you just have to make sure that you succeed, that is the time I think I will step in and say, now I'm ready to help you. And all those things with PSLE and whatever O-levels and all of that, you went through yourself, because you are just discovering your own innate abilities and just negotiating your own way. But now that you've discovered your true calling, how can I help? So I think maybe sometimes society creates all these things. Like, why do we say you have to go to, let's not say that. Why do we say you have to score A's or pass, and then when you don't, we say you fail? I mean, you know, it's all created by us, and if we can redefine some of these things, then there's less failure to speak of, I think.
Well, okay, so coming back, was it about failure? Are we still talking about failure? Oh, okay, well, I failed a lot as well. I mean, apart from what all the failure I've talked about earlier. So, but again, you know, the reason why I realized that I've got a bit of dyslexic. I'm a bit dyslexic as well. So I have trouble spelling. And because of my trouble spelling, I tend to write badly on purpose so that people can't catch my mistakes. Thank God for Microsoft Word and Google, you know, I stand a chance. But I went and did, when I was doing my MBA, I realized that there were other great men who also have had like were dyslexic and overcame their challenges. The CEO of Prudential is dyslexic. And I realized that it's overcoming the odds with persistence and just being consistently humble about it. You know, and I share this with my group work when I'm charting things and I still make spelling mistakes, and it's embarrassing because my 12-year-old daughter sometimes makes fun of me. But I realize that by admitting it and putting it up front, then you know it becomes a part of a joke, which I am. And I realize that by not taking myself so seriously, I can then perform at a much better level, knowing that this is who I am. I am but a jar of clay which is leaky. I'm leaking all the time. The only thing I can share with all of y'all is that y'all are amazing. Just being here, like what that lady shared, you know, taking the time out, sacrificing your Saturday afternoon, coming and listening to us. I mean, really, you probably know all there is to know about parenting. But the fact is, you're here because you are humble and you want to hear what other people, other challenges have gone through. And I thank you all, and I think that's amazing in itself. So the best part is, in the schools where my daughter is, they've got all these parenting groups, right? And I think that's where we really need to work, right? To share these tips and tools of the trade with these other parents who don't come for these sessions, who really don't care about their kids. You know, I met this girl who said she's never met her father in her life, and she doesn't know what it's like to be hugged by a boy, by a male, other than the male trying to put his hand up her skirt. And it's tragic, right? And you see it over and over. And in Cambodia, where you have child prostitution, it's rampant, you know. And I have a daughter, and I go through science. In fact, I was just going through science with her yesterday, and we were talking about the human reproductive system. But the thing is, as parents, you see, is it wrong for a father to teach that to the daughter? No. But in fact, it's better, because I add in my own stories and how she's valued and how she's this beautiful flower, and you're not to be taken lightly, or no other bees come to you. And so these values are taught through learning and these little things, and I believe that's, for me, is the best way. Thanks.
Okay, so we hear from the panel that in helping our child overcome the personal difficulties, there are a few actions that we can take, but these actions really depend on, it's different for each child. But undergirding all these actions that we take is love, is that kind of relationships that we have for our children. And I recall my days, you know, the naughty kid in my room with the parents, and then there was some issues that he need to address. He needs to pull up his socks and all that. In the end, I just say, will you do it? You see, your parents beside me is crying. And in the end, the child decides to change because of his love for his parents. And I think that underscores the importance of your role, of your relationships with the child in helping him overcome his or her difficulties. Do we have time for one more question? There about, I think I will just mention this one, because it is one of the questions that it has the highest votes, is about perhaps how do we develop our kids the ability to interact with people. And this question reads, children interact mainly via digital medium and have little exposure on face-to-face personal interactions. How do we prepare them through this emotional approach for the future aged population industries?
Okay, so I deal with teenagers day in, day out, and I can tell you that their phones are a bane of my life. But the thing is, we have to find a way to work around it. It is what it is. It's there. You see, I mean, earlier David mentioned that reading is very important, right? So in my time, all we did was read and play in the playground because there was no phone. So it was very easy because we really had no distractions, and we had terrible TV. So now you are literally fighting with a social monster. It's very interesting, the things that they get up to. So I'm on their socials as well, just to see and keep up with the stuff that they do. So I would say two things, lah. One is that you, as parents, because you know your kids best, I think you need to make that relationship too. Whenever I take the train, I always pay attention to parents with children. And I always find that the parents are on the phone just as much as their kids. And to me, that, because we find it very interesting, right? I mean, there's so much to catch up on. If you'd let me, I would be on my phone too. But so I think this is a conscious decision that we all have to make. If you want your kid to interact with you, you have to interact with them. You have to put your phone aside. You tell them to put their phone aside, and then talk to them. It's quite hard lah, because they won't talk to you. But you can try. I mean, and the more you try and the more practice you have, the better it becomes. Just like her, I mean, I meet parents all the time. And yeah, in the first 5 minutes already, I can tell what kind of relationship the parent has with the kid. And usually it's the relationship that is close because they are talking, is the one that can overcome some of the difficulties that they face in school. It's the kind of relationship that is very fractured and very dysfunctional. Like, they don't know what's going on with their kid. They don't care. They do their own thing. That's the harder one to bridge. So that's what I would say about dealing with social media. I think we also have to set our own standards about what we expect. And then, of course, the other thing is to limit their use as well, as especially for the young kids. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
yes,
okay, just to provide another point of view, because, when there are 2 yeses or 1 yes is redundant, right? So it's just another point of view. When we were young, my parents used to tell me, why don't you just stop watching TV and go outside to play? Then now we're telling our kids, why don't you put on your phone and come and watch TV with us? So I think every generation maybe has something that the young gets up to, and it could be, I think, perfectly okay that they're behaving that way, and that we are the ones that need to adjust. I think every generation every adult generation kind of feels like we know better than our children, but our children eventually actually surpass us in many, many ways. And actually we get our thoughts about the future wrong all the time. It's impossible to predict the future. I mean, my parents, in my parents' time, they hardly knew any graduates because there were just so few, and they didn't think that I needed to go to university. And then when I graduated, there were just 6% of the country that were graduates. But now, if my kids go to university, they would graduate into a situation where there are 40% graduates. And if you have young kids, it may hit 50%. So the opportunities when the 50% of the country are graduates will be very different from when it's 6%. And what is it that we know? What is it that my parents knew about the future? The internet hadn't arrived. And now, with some of the things that, David, we're friends, and he's telling me about how things would change in the future, and some of these ways that it's going to change, we cannot even imagine right now. So what would our kids get up to? It's very hard to, so I say that when books were invented, we read, and then our generation wore a lot of glasses. Maybe my father's generation wore a lot of glasses. But then this generation, we invented LASIK to fix short-sightedness. And maybe our kids staring at their phones, it gets so bad. But maybe their generation invents bionic eyes. I mean, that's not science fiction, They're really working on it. These artificial eyes that would enable you to see. And that fixes the problem. So I just another point of view, that some of these ills, like the phone and all that we think may be problems, may just be really what defines us in the future, and we actually find new ways of interacting and solving some of these social problems. And we don't insist on the way that we are familiar with ourselves growing up, because we grew up at a different time.
Thank you for your reminder about how important it is to take a long-term view towards education, and that to remain open to possibilities and to look at things from multiple perspectives. So certainly, I've heard different perspective about parenting, and I'm sure you have your own views about how you want to continue to educate and to continue to shape the development of your children. So we have come to the close of this session. And I would like to thank our panelists once again, Crispina, Christian, and Meng, for being here with us.